mentioned the defense cuts. I know you've been particularly vocal about that. Can you expand upon why you're so concerned about that and the impacts you see that having, particularly in your district and
Sure.
also on a national level?
Sure. So under Secretary Gates a few years ago, Congress cut defense by about $475 billion over 10 years. So that comes out to about $50 billion a year. Those were targeted cuts. The wars were winding down in Iraq and Afghanistan. Iraq at that point, I think, was pretty much over. Afghanistan was winding down, and so we figured that we could lessen defense spending and still maintain our defensive posture around the world and still be able to secure the homeland. So that was $50 billion a year starting this year. Sequester was a budget, let's say, I don't want to call it a budget gimmick, but it was an attempt at making Republicans and Democrats work together. I didn't vote for it. I thought it was a bad idea in the first place, but it passed the House and it passed the Senate, and what that does is that automatically cuts another $50 billion a year for 10 years out of defense, but it does not do it in a targeted way. So it's going to cut the Navy SEALs as much as it would cut the folks who serve food in the chow hall on bases where they don't get any deployments overseas. So it's an indiscriminate across the board cut on defense, and it's also an indiscriminate across the board cut on other sectors of government. And it's all done in the structure of what's called the Graham-Rudman-Hollings Act, which is the law that sets forth what it can cut and what it can't cut, right? So anyway, so sequester cuts defense by another $50 billion. So what you have then, when we cut defense by $475 billion, that took the military down to what it said and what we thought was its red line. And so if you take it another $50 billion lower, you're now dealing with a military that's not going to be able to do what the American people think it can do and what Congress has prescribed it to do. So at a certain point here, we either need to fund the military to the level that it needs, or have a national dialogue about where we want the military to go and whether we think it should be doing what it's doing around the world, and if that's the type of engagement that we want. Because the worst thing you can do is say, we want you to keep doing everything that you've been doing, we think you're doing great, but we want you to do it with $100 billion a year less. And I don't know if you know, but the president exempted personnel, so all of those cuts go into training, go into operations. They're actually going to cut research and development, they're going to cut manufacturing, they're going to cut ship repair and ship building, which is big in Southern California. And the defense industry in Southern California is big. So as an ancillary point, it is going to hurt Southern California's economy. It's going to hurt Riverside's economy, but especially San Diego and I would say Temecula South, because that's the little defense hub. So as you know, it's not a jobs issue, but the fact that we're on the West Coast, we have the Marine Corps and the Navy deploying out of San Diego, and we have all of the defense industrial base that's here to support them. By the nature of these cuts taking effect, it is going to drastically harm the economy here. Now what's worse than that, and I haven't heard this from the military until about a few weeks ago, but even worse than sequester is if the military has to operate under another continuing resolution for another year. That's going to be worse for them than the sequestration, because what the CR means is they're not allowed to move money around. They can't turn programs off and turn other programs on. They can't stop projects. They can't move money from one project that's failing to another one. So what they are then is just stymied, where they're not able to do anything. And if that happens, here's just an example. There were going to be 12 ship availabilities in San Diego. That means there were going to be 12 ships that were going to be repaired in San Diego. The Navy's canceled all 12 of those repair jobs. There's some big companies that are issuing what's called WARN Acts right now. BAE just issued one to about 3,500 employees, saying that if there is a CR again and there is not an actual budget passed, then we could be letting go up to 3,500 employees over the next few months. So the Navy's required by law to let the defense industrial base know if there might not be the work, and that's what they just did last Friday.